Hi, this is Murphy. This is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, and on this channel I talk about books because I love to talk about books, and BookTube is the only place I have to talk about them. And so today I'm doing the new BookTubers tag, and I want to first tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll get into the questions of the tag. I'm not going to go over the questions in the order that they were. I sort of divided them out into what my past was, what my present is, and what my future will be with respect to BookTube. So, a little bit about me. I have had two careers. I first was, right out of college, I was a computer programmer analyst. I worked in industry. I worked in various industries. And then I went back to graduate school so that I could teach college mathematics. And so I have been teaching college mathematics for a long time. And I retired 2 years ago, I think. It was after one full school year of COVID. That wasn't why I retired, but it was just a coincidence. In fact, I joked around that since I had been teaching remotely during COVID, when I retired, no one even knew I was gone because no one was around. Anyway, so that's what I've done in my life. I'm retired now. I'm also an artist. I do mixed media art, assemblage, collage, and other mixed media types of art. And I'm a sewist. I have sewn some of my own clothes. This minion shirt is not one of them. I have sewn some of my own clothes, but I have told myself I couldn't buy new clothes for the rest of my life. And by new, I mean right off the rack, fast fashion or slow fashion. So many tons and tons and tons of clothes end up in landfills every year, and I want to put an end to that as much as I can personally. And so I use my sewing skills to refashion the clothes I own, to resize them if needed. I have been having to take out my waist just a little bit, and but I also buy thrifted clothes, or sometimes someone will gift some clothes to me that they've worn and they don't want anymore. In particular, He Who Caters to My Every Whim, HWC for short, HWC often gifts me clothes that aren't worn out, that he's not going to wear anymore, and I refashion them for myself. I'm 5'9", he's 6'4". Everything that he has will fit me to a certain extent, but it all has to be shortened. But anyway, so I'm a mixed media artist, I'm a sewist, and I'm a fledgling birder. In terms of sports, I participate in golf, I ride my bicycle, and I swim. I don't do any of those things as often as I should. But so that's a little bit of background about me, and so now into the new BookTuber tag. And again, I've rearranged the questions so that I answer what my past of reading was like, what my present of reading is like, and what my future with respect to you with BookTube. So, two questions I'm putting together. When did you start reading, and what book or series got you started? I don't remember when I started to read. My guess is that actually reading sentences and words started in first grade. I didn't go to kindergarten that wasn't part of school when I went to school and where I went to school. And so first grade, I probably started learning to read from books, but I had been involved with books as far back as I can remember. So in my bedroom, my sister and I had a bedroom together. In our bedroom, there was a small bookshelf. It had just 2 or 3 shelves on it, and it was full of books that probably had either belonged to my brothers before me or had been bought by my mom. I guess, and some of them, I think my paternal grandmother had bought. But I would, even before I could read, I would pull these books off the shelf and look through them. Most of them had pictures in them. And so here are some examples of some of those books. We had a small selection of the best children's books, and these have stories and illustrations. This particular one has a short version of Robin Hood, Heidi Goes to the Pasture, The Walrus and the Carpenter, one of my favorite poems, probably the first poem I ever read, How the Camel Got Its Hump, which is, if I remember correctly, that's a Kipling story, yeah, and some other things. So it has a variety of a little bit of history, a little bit of adventure stories, poetry, some sciencey kinds of things aimed at young readers. And so we had those. Also had the 3-volume set of the Family Treasury of children's stories. And not too long ago, I read through this particular volume. And this was one of my favorite ones. These are not the ones that we had when we were kids. I got these at thrift stores or whatever. And I wrote in a lot of the ones that we had. And then we also had, one of my favorite things to look at the pictures was this set of Encyclopedia. And you can see from the pictures on the front that this has a lot of interesting pictures in it. And it is aimed at young readers. So I've been trying to recreate that bookshelf, and so these are examples of ones that got me started reading, or at least interested in books, because I would pull them off the shelf even before I started reading, and I would just go through the pictures. And I remember spending many hours just entertaining myself with the books off of that shelf. And so there's no specific book or series that got me started, except that there was that bookshelf. Why do I love to read? I love to read for the joy of exploration and discovery. There is so much to discover out there. I got an example of a book off the shelf just to show and to talk about with respect to this. Dylan Thomas Collected Poems. I have not read this book. And so there's a lot to discover in here. There are pages and pages of things to discover. I haven't read this book, but most probably what will happen is that as I'm reading poems in here, I will discover that I have read some of these before, and I will remember where that was. The poems, the individual poems are there to discover. Each one has a story or an idea or a feeling, so I have that to discover. I might discover new turns of phrases, new vocabulary. I might discover that I don't like Dylan Thomas, and that's fine too. I don't have to like everything that I discover, but I'm also discovering things about myself. So, that's why I love to read. I think that the amount that we can discover from reading is so much more than other media. So, I mean, yes, I discover things on YouTube, but I don't think the amount of things that I discover on YouTube is quite as broad as what I discover by reading. For one thing, the algorithm of YouTube is feeding me things that I probably like, whereas when I pick up books, I pick up all kinds of books. So I think in terms of a media, it provides us with frontiers that we can't get from other media. Where do I read? If I'm going to read a book, like this Dylan Thomas book or something on my Kindle or a newspaper or whatever, I'm going to read sitting in a comfortable chair with my feet up. And so in my bedroom, I have a love seat recliner. In the living room, there's a couch that has recliner, and then out on my porch, I have a comfy couch that's a porch couch, and then someplace to prop up my feet. I don't like to read in bed. I prefer to be sitting up. If I'm listening to a book, then that could be, if I'm listening to a book, that could be practically anywhere, walking, driving the car, doing housework, wherever, while I'm sewing, wherever I have the ability to hear a book. And so when I'm listening to a book, my hearing aids are Bluetooth, and so I almost always direct the book into my hearing aids so that it's right here. So I could be listening to a book and you wouldn't know. I'm not, though. What kind of books do I like to read? How much time do we have? And in some ways it might be easier to say what it is that I don't like to read, because that's a smaller list. But here are some examples of things that I like to read. In nonfiction, I read science, history. For some reason, the wars in the 20th century, the history of those wars and what happened during them seems to be a popular subject for me. Sociology, psychology, true crime, some memoirs. A memoir has to be specifically interesting to me to be something I want to read. A lot of them, I think, are just the same thing recycled, so not so many memoirs. And some analyses of literature, especially if I'm reading something that is hard to read, I will accompany it with some analysis in some way. Types of literature, and by this I mean types of literature, novels, poetry, plays, and serial art. And by that I mean graphic novels, graphic short stories, some comics, not that much for comics, but more graphic novels, graphic memoirs, things like that. So I think a graphic memoir is actually can be more interesting than a memoir in words, because it's probably drawn by the author as well. And so, and even if it's not, the drawings are influenced by the author of the memoir. And so I like some graphic memoirs. What types of novels do I like to read? I read a lot of women's lit, police procedurals, thrillers, classics, sci-fi, just about anything. I don't read so many romances. I used to say that I didn't like horror, and then I realized I started making a list of all the horror books I've read, and so I like some horror, but I don't like other horror. Fantasy, not as much, although I've read some fantasy. So I have read some romances. I've read some westerns. So I dabble in everything. I'll like I say, I'll try anything once and the fun things twice. What does my book collection look like? I'm literally just going to show you what my book collection looks like. And so I don't know how many books everyone else has, but I felt like when I started making this video, started thinking about it, that I didn't have very many books. But then I went around the house and took a picture of each and every one of my bookshelves. And now I can't decide, do I have very many books or not? If a book doesn't mean something to me, if I think I can just check it out, electronically from the library, etc., I will just do that. Just like not buying any new clothes, I'm not buying any new books. Now, and by that I mean I'm not buying books that are right off the shelf. I will buy thrifted books, I will buy used books, and I will buy plenty of electronic books because those will not end up in the landfill. I am sure that we could argue that there's something bad about reading books electronically for the environment, but I know for a fact the large percentage of books that have existed that are now in our landfills. And I don't want to contribute to that. So I keep some books, but then I donate others to, thrift stores or other places, wherever a place where they can use the books that I have. So what does my book collection look like? The first shelf, which is the one that's right behind me, is the novels and literature. So this is plays, poetry, novels, other literature on this shelf. And some of these are double stacked. The next shelf, as we travel from where I am through the house, the next shelf is a built-in shelf that has graphic novels and comics on it. And I've sometimes feel like I have a large selection of graphic novels, but then when I talk to some of my friends and colleagues that actually collect them, I don't think I have such a large collection. I have trouble giving away a graphic novel, donating it somewhere, but I'm not opposed to reading serial art on my Kindle. But when I do read serial art, I read it on my iPad in the Kindle app so that I get color, and then I also get the features of being able to zoom in on a cell and zoom out for a page. And possibly, depending on the book, zooming out to a spread. All right, the next shelf next to the graphic novels has reference books, birding books, foreign language books on it, weird things also. Shakespeare is there. I don't know why Shakespeare is there instead of being on the literature shelf, but it is an annotated Shakespeare book. Maybe I thought it needed to be with the reference books. I don't know. I read Spanish and I'm learning French. I've learned about this much German, this much French, and I know a lot more Spanish. All right, the next shelf is in the basement, and this is the shelves I showed you were my books. This shelf is a blended shelf. It has the strange collection of sci-fi, golf, some vinyl, some college yearbooks. It's a strange thing, but this is probably mostly HWC's books with mine combined in, and I can't really get rid of any of these because I can't mess with his books. And so I would otherwise. But on the other hand, sometimes classic science fiction is hard to come by. The next book is almost entirely his, and it's mystery, detective novels, thrillers, and some golf thrown in, as well as, you know, cups from the schools that he's taught at or gone to. He's a chemistry professor, retired. He's much older than I am, and so he's been retired for quite a while. And again, I cannot touch this shelf. I can't even, so far as rearrange things on this shelf. Even though I talked about this in another video, I don't think he's reading paper books anymore. I think he's only reading on his Kindle so that he can get large text, and but still, I can't touch these. Two more shelves. Now, for the next two shelves, we're going to move into my art studio, which is the unfinished part of the basement. And the first of these shelves has Math of Art books, my art journals, and a variety of other things related to that. So there's probably some art instruction books. There's just blank journals. There are altered books. Anyway, anything having to do with art, where you're making art. Oh, there's also a bunch of sewing books here, so I consider that art as well. And then mixed in are things that I've done. And then finally, the final shelf, which is the most disorganized, most not very well selected. It's just that that's what there was room for those items on that shelf. And that's children's books, artist books, so books about artists or an art era, nature books, and so there's bird books, a lot of bird books that are just birding, images, lots of bird art, and then fodder. So I actually take books from dumpsters and then use the pages of those books in art. So these are books that have been discarded, nobody wanted them. In fact, a lot of my art books came out of those dumpsters as well. My college library did a purge not too long ago, and I went through the dumpster and pulled books out. Some of those I kept to use, and some of those have become art fodder. And if that disturbs you, I apologize, but these books were going to go into the landfill anyway. So I'm repurposing them. All right, so that's my past and sort of the present of where I am with books. What's the present for where I am with this BookTube channel? Why did I start this channel? In 2008, I started a book blog. I had been driving to Alaska for a sabbatical, and in the 7-8 days that I took to drive there, I listened to quite a few books. And when I would get to the hotel or the campground that night, I would write about the books I'd listened to on the, on the road. And I realized that this was a great way for me to help me remember the books, was to write about them, but it also satisfies a maxim that I have about teaching and learning, and that is no real learning happens without reflection. And so I decided to start reflecting on what I was reading in a blog. So I started a blog in 2008. I still have it. I still add to it. The link will be in the description. It's not a link yet because I haven't become a trusted YouTuber yet. So YouTube won't make my links live, but that will happen over time. But anyway, I still have that blog. I often will write in it in order to help me think about what I want to, whether I want to create a video or what I would have put in that video. And so that has become a little less satisfying over time because I don't really have any subscribers. Occasionally someone will post a question or a comment on my blog, but I don't really get much discussion. And so I wanted to start this BookTube channel to be able to do that, more of that discussing. So it gives me an opportunity to talk. I feel more fulfilled when I'm talking about books rather than writing about books, although I like writing about books as well. What are some fun, exciting things that I can bring to YouTube? And I got a few books to talk about that might help with that. One thing that I thought that I could bring is just strange connections or obscure references, etc. And so I have this book. It's called The Day the Century Ended, and I have the dust jacket, but it's deteriorated. The Day the Century Ended, and this is by Francis Irby Gwaltney. And Francis Gwaltney was actually English professor at my undergraduate school, and his wife was my English instructor. And this book, The Day the Century Ended, is a World War II book. And let me read you this. It's a distinguished novel about a boy's coming of age in the brutally violent world of war. So first of all, we are sending boys and now girls to war. That's something that I think we need to remember. I'm currently reading a book about the Korean War, and the kids that are in there, I mean, they are kids. They're 18, 19, 20. These are students I would have, the age of students I would have in an introductory math class. And so I think about that they have a gun, they're responsible for possibly killing people and taking the chance of them being killed, watching their friends being killed. Anyway, they're children. But also this book is, I mean, it's not just a coming of age in terms of war and that sort of thing. It's a coming of age book in terms of recognizing that people of different classes, and we still are, but before World War II, very classist, especially in the South, which is where this was written, coming to realize that people of different classes are people. And so the person that this book is about is in a privileged class, and he ends up being in a unit with someone that he thinks of as being in a lower class. And so it's the day the century ended. Even though it's World War II, we're talking about the 40s. This is really when he felt that the previous century with slavery and all of that sort of thing finally ended. They made a book out about it. Now I don't remember what the book is. Another book connected to me in some way via education is Carver, A Still Life in Poems by Marilyn Nelson. And the Carver in the image is George Washington Carver. And the small liberal arts college that I taught at, I was there for 29 years and now I'm an adjunct. That was the first school of higher education that would allow George Washington Carver to enroll. And he'd been to others and they'd said he couldn't come. And so this is a book of poetry written by Marilyn Nelson about George Washington Carver. And so there's the connection with where I work. I actually work in the Carver building. And George Washington Carver and poetry, lots of connections there. I'm going to look to see who this is by first. Malba Tahan. So this is The Man Who Counted by Malba Tahan. This is a set of short chapters that are sort of like The 1001 Arabian Nights. The person, the traveler in this book has to tell stories, has to entertain his hosts in order to be able to stay there. And the stories that he tells are all math related. And so this is some of these are appropriate for young readers. I mean, nothing in this is lurid or, not appropriate in terms of content, but the reading level might be a little higher than for young readers. But these are cute little stories that teach a little math along the way. And then one more, and just to remind you, this is an answer to what can I bring to this channel, to YouTube, to BookTube, that others might not. And it is my interest in birds. And so What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Allen Sibley. And if you have a young preteen or teenager who's you think might be interested in birds, this is a great book for them. And I'll see if I can show this. So here's an example of a spread. Each spread in this book is about a particular owl. This is more owls, so they'd already had something about owls. And it's not encyclopedic. It's more, here are some interesting facts about owls. Here are some things that you need to know. And so you can open up to any one page in this book and read without having to read anything else. And the artwork is Sibley's artwork, and it has just a variety of things. And it's not the same sort of facts about each bird. And so this is one of my favorite bird books, although I have lots. This is one of my favorites. I have other favorites. So I think those are examples of kind of books and kind of ideas that I can bring to YouTube that others might not. What challenges do you think starting a BookTube channel will be the hardest to overcome? And for me, it's time. And I don't mean having time. I have all the time in the world for editing and that sort of thing, and for reading. And no, it's having time to actually video. Having time to video when the house is quiet, because HWC is not quiet. And so I tend to video when he is golfing. And so that's one reason I video in the afternoon. Another has to do with just have it being the most with it brain-wise in the afternoon. But that's the only way I can video without him having the television on, cooking, whatever, all the things that he does. So that's the hardest thing. What am I most excited about with this new channel and it's the ability to talk about books. Of course, I'm talking about books, but other people have already started asking me questions or giving me input, giving me recommendations for books that are related to books that I've had, telling me whether they liked or didn't like the books that I've talked about and why. And people have said they've taken my recommendations. And so that I think is the most exciting thing, is the ability to talk about books, which is why I have this channel. And then the last question, what question do you have for other booktubers? I don't really have any questions right now. Any technical questions about how to do videos and that sort of thing, I can discover on my own. Or, I mean, I've already had to make videos for online learning. I've been doing that actually longer than, before COVID. But I'm getting, even now, I keep getting better at that. And so I don't have any technical questions, but I think other questions will just come up organically over time. I have posted questions on other people's BookTube channels, and that's another way for me to discuss books with people. And so when those questions come up, I'll ask them. So I was really worried about how long this video would take, and it's longer than my others. I probably could have made it a little shorter by not introducing so many books and that sort of thing, but I felt like I needed to sort of, by talking about specific books, answers the questions that I was trying to answer in this tag. So I have a couple of videos that are scheduled to come out. I have a big list of ideas of things that I might talk about videos. I've got several book hauls to talk about. So I think I've got some material to keep this channel going at least for a month or two more. We'll see. And I've enjoyed thinking about this tag and coming up with the answers. I watched some other people's new BookTuber tag videos to see the sorts of things they said. And again, I want to say this again because it's true. No real learning happens without reflection. And the process of writing and creating a video and then reflecting on what's in the video. I mean, there's several layers of reflection here that really help us grow. And that's what I've been doing all my life, is trying to learn, trying to teach. And so this has been fun. All right, I'm going to go now and take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.